We begin. opening words are a poem I wrote that was a part of my healing. I am alive. When I fell, the mountain was hard. It did not bend gracefully with the wind. The mountain was rock. It was millions of years in the making. It took no notice of my flesh. I was nothing, nothing on impact. Crumpled, dissolved, separated from my precious body, I was nothing. The mountain was vast, intimidating. It was gorgeous, angular, strong beyond the imagination. It was how I felt before I launched down its unending slopes. Now healing and mending the fractures and tears, I am human flesh and bone. My spirit is lifting, soaring above, imagining I am alive.
We light our chalice this morning for our fragile and resilient human bodies and for the strength of our earth and of mountains and all that connects us. And we'll join in our opening hymn if you will rise in body or in spirit. Our opening hymn is Our World is One World in Your Gray or Cloth-Bound Hymnals.
Welcome to the First Parish in Bedford, a Unitarian Universalist congregation where we come together every week as a people with diverse beliefs and a shared commitment to bring more peace, love, and justice into the world. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whether you should worship one God or many gods or no God, you are welcome here. And I want to say a special welcome to any visitors here this morning in person or on Zoom. We are glad you're here with us. Here in the sanctuary, you're invited to fill out a blue connection card, which you'll find at the end of your pews, or you can scan the QR code at the end of your order of service. You can give the card to one of the ushers during the collection, and we'll add you to the mailing list. In Zoom, there will be a link added to the chat for the same form, so you can fill out your virtual connection card. Parents and caregivers of little ones, we're always delighted to have them in the sanctuary with us, but we also have a nursery downstairs that you're welcome to take advantage of. We have some notebooks and pencils in the pews that are a new addition for people of all ages who find doodling helpful, a way to engage in worship. All right, so announcements. I want to say a big thank you to the awesome auction team last night who came together to raise $22,215. So, thank you to bidders, volunteers, auctioneers, and all the wonderful people who put that together, especially our chief volunteer wrangler, Kath Van Prague, who is done with this after this year, right? Donors and attendees should have received an email from Actura, whatever, in detailing any donations or winnings. Your bills can be paid with a link in the email or writing a check to First Parish with Auction 2024 in the memo line. If you have any questions or you'd like to be Kath next year, you can email the auction team and they'd be happy to talk to you about it. We also have plant fair swag available. If you didn't buy enough last night, go find the plant fair in the common room today. Items are limited. We will also be having a climate cafe following today's service at 11:30 in the Bacon Room. The Climate Cafe will be an opportunity to learn more about the public comment period regarding the developer's report for the proposed Hanscom Field project for private jets. So, Rick Johnson, a former attorney for the Environmental Protection Agency, will provide an overview with some questions and answers facilitated by Reverend Jamie. Also, there will be signs, yard signs available at the EJC table after the service if you'd like to pick one up. And you can also sign a letter to be sent as a public comment to the developer draft report regarding the Hanscom project. Please note that the senior youth group today will meet at 5:30 today, not 3:30 as noted in your order of service. So, announcements done. Now, if you would please rise again, we will share our unison affirmation, which is in your order of service.
A couple weeks ago, well, maybe about a month ago, actually, I went with 3 members of our senior youth group and 2 of our adult youth advisors, and also with Reverend Jamie, to an organization called Household Goods. And this organization in Acton collects furniture and household needs that they then provide for free to those who are setting up a home, maybe for the first time or maybe after some life event that has caused them to temporarily not have a home. And it was very inspiring, and we had a great time. Jamie and I were on the moving crew, and so we got to do a lot of schlepping furniture out to moving trucks, which is not my strong suit, but I hope I did more good than harm. But when we had our orientation, when we all got there, they told us a little about the organization, and they told us a little about how it started, and I really, really liked the story of how it started, because it's something that I can imagine happening right here. It started with a person named Barbara Smith in 1990, and she put a notice in her church bulletin. I think we'd probably put it on the Anno email list here, but it was 1990. She put a notice in her church bulletin asking for furniture donations so that she and her husband Ira could help furnish an apartment for a woman they were connected to and her young sons who were fleeing violence in San Salvador. And they received so many donations from their church that they had way more than they needed for this one family. And so they offered the excess of their furniture to the local housing authority. They said, oh, we have all this furniture, maybe somebody else can use this. And then that group started telling people to call the Smiths if they needed furniture. Imagine. I can imagine this very well. It reminds me of when someone who worked for the state of Massachusetts called my cell phone to see if my immigration network could help out with housing people who were arriving in Massachusetts. This is what happens. Our state agencies get overwhelmed. They call on random people who have helped people in the past. And so that was how it began. And the Smiths started putting all the furniture in their garage. And then pretty soon there was too much for their garage. So they had to get another building to put it in, and they had to get another building to put it in. And pretty soon there was a whole organization that really, it runs like a well-oiled machine there, I have to say. It's very impressive. Tons of volunteers. The furniture is put out nicely so that it's sort of like one of those stores you walk through and see all the different options so that people can shop with some dignity, even though it's free and donated. And I love thinking about these kinds of stories where just somebody wanted to help somebody they were connected to. So then they reached out to some other people they were connected to, and then pretty soon there's a whole web of connection helping all kinds of people that they didn't initially plan to help. And so later in this service, I'm going to talk a lot about how the ways we're connected sometimes cause a lot of harm. And that is true. Sometimes we cause a lot of hurt with our connections. But I wanted to start by remembering and reminding all of us, and especially our young people, that little things we do to help others can get really, really big the more people that get involved. So with that, we will sing our kids and youth out to their Sunday morning activities.
I'm on the Lay Pastoral Care Committee, and this is a time in our service when you may come up and light a candle of joy or of sorrow, and please keep it brief. Please give us your name. We'll talk to the people in sanctuary first, and then we will talk to you on Zoom. I will light this last candle for all those joys and sorrows we hold in our heart, and I will remain by the candle stand after the service in case you would like to light a candle in private.
And we'll have a stewardship moment as we are in our stewardship campaign from Karen Frederick. Thank you, Karen.
Good morning. I'm Karen Frederick. Last Sunday, Reverend Jamie ended the service with the words of Carolyn Bellamy, and I'll share them again with you. If here you have found freedom, take it with you into the world. If you have found comfort, go and share it with others. If you have dreamed dreams, help one another that they may come true. If you have known love, give some back to a bruised and hurting world. Go in peace. I whispered to my neighbor, I have that one on my kitchen bulletin board. And that person said, I do too. So if you have, that it resonates, if you have found comfort, if you have found love, give some back. And today I'll say, give some back through your pledge. Being here among you and belonging to First Parish, And being part of Unitarian Universalism is the way I have aspired to clarify my values and aspired to live them. Whether I think about it as the 7 principles, and I think about them often, and I carry around this little card that has the principles in it. Maybe that's still out in the hallway there. Dignity and worth, justice, acceptance of other people, reason, the democratic process, seeking peace, the interdependent web of all existence, or as they are expressed in the proposed UU revisions that are now underway nationally. They are guides for me. And among you, I try. Well, we need a setting in which to do this, a venue, a place, a location to come together. And I came here and found such a location. Well, I came to First Parish first time, seeking a place for meditation and contemplation, a respite where I could clarify my values. Well, I didn't find it. There was all that chatter before the service, and now I understand. That is our way of coming together rather than some holy quiet. But instead, I found community, and I've been here ever since. And through community, I've clarified my values and tried to live them out. Well, I looked around and said, what is going to be my symbol? There are symbols for religion. And that globe in the chandelier is my symbol. When I look at it, I'm in the middle. I'm right in the middle. Yeah. And I would sit over there, and I'd raise my program, and I was in the middle, and I'd sit over there, and I was in the middle. And if you look at it, you'll find you are in the middle. And you can see all those other people reflected in that. And you can see the windows that take us out in the world. Sometimes I would count them. Are there really all those windows? Yeah, they are. Well, what that said to me is we are each in the middle, and the community is all around us. And you can count on that community. Well, from another perspective, my kids would say they didn't like Sunday school. They just didn't like it. I made them come anyway. In middle school, before we expanded this building, my son's class met down the street at somebody's house. And after their lesson, they rushed back to church. Guess what for? Snacks. And we know snacks are a theme this year. Were there any snacks left for them? He'd race right by me. There they came, all those kids. They felt excluded. For a while, they were given a small room down in the basement. And my son said he felt that the whole church was doing great up above him, and there they were, abandoned in the basement. Meanwhile, there was an adult who said to me that after 6th grade, kids didn't come to church. Aha, you see the circularity there, how that one would lead to another. Around 1994, I helped out in a class of 10 or so 6- and 7-year-olds. They were meeting in the first floor, before we built this, in a room that was created using a divider on wheels. And there was only room for them to stand around a table. If one kid shifted, or was wiggly, the whole batch of them had to move. When I left, I felt the teacher was doing absolutely the best possible given that situation. But now I could understand why my kids didn't like Sunday school. So we've used our resources, our financial resources, to put on this edition. And when I heard that we were going to work on an edition, I said, oh, I want to work on that. So little did I know that from like 1995 to 1998, I was going to be on a planning committee all that long. Well, we did it, and everybody did it, and here we are. So you can see how, in my perspective, this place is a base. It nurtures each of us. It's kind of a launching pad for living out our UU values. And more than ever, the world needs to hear our values. The world needs to hear that Unitarian Universalism values have message for them. And I continue to need it. So, in Bellamy's words, if you have found something among us in this community, give back and give as generously as you can in your pledge, and maybe give more than generously if you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, for all you've done for this community and for that sweet testimony. I will never look at the chandelier the same way. We will have a brief sung response. We have a lot of parts to the service today. It's good to stand up and sing. So Brad will play it through once, and we will sing it 3 times. It's quite short. It's number 402, From You I Receive. A returning guest from the Coalition to Stop Private Jet Expansion at Hanscom or anywhere as our Share the Plate recipient today, because the last time we had Share the Plate for that organization, we ended up on Zoom because of a snowstorm, and that's not a sufficient Share the Plate experience for First Parish in Bedford. So I'd love to invite up Kati Winchell from that coalition, and we will be sharing our offering with that organization this morning.
Good morning. I'm Kati Winchell, and I've been invited to talk with you today about the Coalition to Stop Private Jet Expansion at Hanscom or Anywhere, SPJE for short, of which First Parish of Bedford is a member. Thank you for your support and for the opportunity to speak with you today. As you may know, Massport and Runway Realty Ventures are proposing a massive private jet expansion on 50 acres of land at Hanscom Field, which could ultimately house 79 additional private jets. These will include big jets, like Gulfstream 650s that are 100 feet long with 100-foot wingspans that can fly nonstop from Hanscom to China. Please note, this development plan has nothing to do with Hanscom Air Force Base, which is a non-flying base and is separate from Massport Civil Airport. Since I spoke with you on that snowy Sunday last February, the developers have filed a new report called a DEIR, a Draft Environmental Impact Report, as part of a state environmental review process. In the report, the developers lead with the fact that they've decreased the number of new hangars from 26 to 17, while in fact they've increased the total infrastructure by 27,000 square feet. They've simply made the hangars bigger so that, as in one case, they can accommodate a potential client's desire to keep all 4 of their private jets in one hangar. Even without this new expansion, private jet emissions at Hanscom alone already cancel nearly 50% of the climate gains from all solar PV ever installed in Massachusetts. If the plan goes forward, this will increase to 70%. Amazingly, the developers claim in their new report that this enormous facility for super-emitting private jets will reduce flights, will reduce greenhouse gas emissions, will be net zero, and will promote sustainable aviation fuels, SAFs. How is this possible? Well, when they say it's a net zero project, they only count emissions from buildings and ignore the hundreds of thousands of tons of aircraft emissions. When they say they'll promote SAFs, they neglect to point out that SAFs generate as much greenhouse gas emissions, sometimes more, as regular jet fuel, and that these biofuels would hijack arable land from food production. This would be a new fossil fuel infrastructure, plain and simple, as suggested by plans for 4 underground tanks of 80,000 gallons of jet fuel total and daily truck deliveries of 20,000 gallons. Their claims that the proposed facility will result in a decrease of flights is based on flawed methodology and have been refuted by a detailed independent analysis from a reputable firm, which found that the new facility would add 6,000 flights with resulting new greenhouse gas emissions. Senator Mike Barrett summed up the situation when he told the developers at a March public meeting, quote, "I know the destruction you folks intend to wreak on Massachusetts, and I resent it. Please don't erect these bogus environmental rationales for something that has nothing whatsoever to do with relieving the crisis that faces us in terms of climate. Just be honest about it. This is all about becoming a little richer yourselves by helping people even richer than you." And I ask, at what cost to all of us and our living planet? A public comment period is now open until May 10th. This is a unique moment when each of us can make a difference through the simple act of submitting a comment. To make this easy, SPJE provides a toolkit on our website. You will not be alone. Over 14,000 people have signed our petition to the governor urging her to stop this expansion. And over 80 organizations across the state are now part of our SPJE coalition, including, among others, UU Mass Action, Sierra Club Massachusetts, and Mothers Out Front Massachusetts, and Third Act Massachusetts. This is a moment when numbers count. The governor will be watching, and so will our state and congressional legislators. If you'd like to know more, you can find me at the Climate Cafe later this morning. In the meantime, I'd like to thank you for your interest and support.
This morning's reading is by Glenn Lamb, who is the Executive Director of the Columbia Land Trust, and this was written in December of 2020, so think back to then. One recent morning, I woke up to a dense, freezing fog. On my morning walk, spider webs that were normally invisible to me were suddenly revealed in every beautiful detail. Another morning, with an inch of fresh snow, a walk that normally seemed solitary was illuminated by a crisscross of animal tracks, the stitched pattern of a mouse, slightly larger lunges of squirrels, exclamation points from the rabbits, and the unmistakable half-moon of deer. So much of life is not obvious as we move through the world. This is a defining experience of 2020. A virus that is everywhere among us, yet visible to no one. Invisible components of our air, carbon dioxide, contribute to warmer and warmer temperatures. Black people report experiences to which many other people are blind. Each of these elements, while literally not visible, are evidence that the well-being of any of us is linked to the well-being of all of us. We may have the occasional illuminated day, like on that frosty, foggy morning, but as a rule, the interconnected nature of our reciprocal relationships remains hidden. It is up to each of us to realize that these unseen connections bind us all, and to live with the curiosity and care to uncover how everything connects. Once I saw the full extent and cleverness of those frosty spider webs, I realized how spiders are playing their role almost everywhere I looked, and my snowy morning walk took on more meaning as I crouched down to examine the otherwise hidden paths of the forest life. A big part of my joy in life is learning how many connections there are that I know nothing about. There is something almost miraculous and sacred about a world that evolves to beautifully support mutual thriving. Therefore, it is so heartbreaking and tragic when I see the results of broken connections and relationships. Let us walk together through our human and non-human worlds and look for the interconnections. Know that whether we see it or not, we are all connected. Let us treat all things with the respect and love we might give to our closest family member. It is a challenge that will serve us well when the next 2020 arrives.
A big part of my joy in life is learning that there are connections I knew nothing about, writes Glenn Lamb in our reading. I remember when I was a teenager, I discovered that there was a family relationship between myself and my best friend Jenny. What we learned was that my great-grandmother's sister's son was her dad's brother's ex-wife's dad. And yes, I can still say that out loud very easily because we talked about it so much that I had it memorized. We were basically part of each other's families already, and so we were so excited that we found this invisible connection linking us through marriage and lineage. Jenny and I were always very different people, even when we had the same purple Adidas jacket and walked the halls inseparable in junior high school. We had very different values and different personalities. She was born to be a mom and now has 5 kids out in Arizona. Kids that she wants to protect from the harm of this world. And I can empathize with that. She homeschools her children, which unfortunately I assume is to protect them from secular and liberal ideas. And from what I can glean, she cares for their physical well-being with a mixture of prayer and essential oils. She would never put something so toxic as a vaccine into their bodies. This year, I read Naomi Klein's book, Doppelganger, which I have referenced before in sermons. And it gave me a whole new insight into anti-vax moms. Klein is drawn into the topics that she explores in this book, topics like anti-vax moms, by her own personal doppelganger, Naomi Wolf. Naomi Klein, for any who are unfamiliar, is a leftist author who came to fame by writing No Logo back in 1999, focusing on branding and anti-globalization movements, and it was shortly after the World Trade Organization protests in Seattle. She has since authored books that are well known, like The Shock Doctrine, about disaster capitalism, and This Changes Everything, about climate change. Naomi Wolf, for any who are unfamiliar, is a feminist author who came to fame by writing The Beauty Myth in 1991, which focused on unrealistic beauty standards. And, as Klein really explores in this book, Naomi Wolf, during the pandemic, took a hard right and became a prominent anti-vaccine activist, developing a close relationship with the far right and appearing on right-wing radio shows and talk shows with regularity. And because, as Klein sort of sarcastically notes, too many people's brains cannot handle more than one famous Jewish woman author named Naomi, Klein has ended up in a hall of mirrors where she is routinely tagged online for Wolf's content, and even had a moment where she was in a bathroom stall and overheard two women in the bathroom talking about how it was such a shame that Naomi Klein has become a conspiracy theorist about vaccines, and we used to like her. As Klein explores her doppelganger and the mirror world of right-wing radio shows, she unearths hidden connections that we might like to avoid seeing. For example, the link between wellness culture and ableism that is found in the COVID anti-vax movement. She talks about an experience when she was going door to door for her husband Avi's political campaign where she lives in Canada. And she describes one woman who had a hippy-dippy vibe coming out of a cloud of sandalwood smoke, who responded to Avi's statement that some people have compromised immune systems and therefore the virus is more deadly for them by saying, "I think those people should die." Klein uncovers connections between fitness and alternative health subcultures and fascism and supremacist movements. She points out that in the United States, early fitness enthusiasts were eugenics enthusiasts, those who wanted to cull out inferior people from the population. And Nazis actually promoted health and fitness and wellness as a part of their campaign too. And while she notes that this fitness fascist connection disappeared for a while after World War II, it's back, resurfacing in the anti-vax and anti-mask movements connected to COVID. Not to mention the whole section of the book where she explores the link between those who blamed vaccines for autism and the links between Nazis and the ways we police neurodivergence, but that's for a different sermon. Klein's exploration of these dynamics includes the observation that sometimes our own wellness practices feel like the only thing we can control. When the news is horrific, which is always, we can still do our yoga practice or go to the gym or go on a walk or take a bicycle ride or whatever it is we need to do for our bodies. And also, as we know, we are not in control of our bodies. Anyone at any time can suddenly find themselves injured, as Dorothy described in her poem and her dance. We can suddenly find ourselves diagnosed with cancer or Parkinson's. We can suddenly find ourselves with long COVID or a chemical sensitivity we didn't previously have. We are all only temporarily able-bodied. The logic behind those who say, "I am tending to my own wellness and yours is not my responsibility," is a deeply ableist logic. And it's also fatphobic, a type of bias so deeply rooted in our culture it is hard to approach anything related to bodies without running into it. And yet, it is true. Our own health is the health we have the most influence over. And here is one of the tensions inherent in our interdependence. What I choose to do is my personal choice that primarily impacts me. What I choose to do impacts you too, whether I want it to or not. We felt this so keenly in the pre-vax stage of the pandemic, and many of us acted accordingly, masking, distancing, doing our part to protect our vulnerable neighbor. Our church kept masking long after many spaces had dropped that requirement. But eventually we dropped it, though we reserve a section for those who wish to attend worship in a masked space. And I'm not saying that was the wrong choice. It was a practical choice, and it reflected our society. I personally do not mask anymore, pretty much anywhere, even though I know that choosing to mask would be the choice that aligns more firmly with my values and with my understanding of interdependence. Here is a tension in our interdependence. We so often create harm that we do not wish to be causing because of our connections. As many of us are keenly aware, it is tax season right now. And this year, as many years, paying taxes fills me with shame and dread. The budget for Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, is going up 13.5%, and the budget for Customs and Border Protection is going up 19%. The most recent spending bill that Biden signed provides the highest appropriations for custody and surveillance operations in ICE's history, ever. And I do not want any percent of the money that I sent in so responsibly to the federal government being paid to put migrants in cages, but I still sent it in. I am simultaneously working for the freedom of those jailed by ICE in the Plymouth County Jail in an overcrowded, underfed, cold, and cruel condition, and I am also paying for their confinement. My tax dollars do not just fund violence here in this country, but in other nations too. The U.S. is an empire that stretches around the world, a global power with outsized impact on people in other lands. And that fact has come into particularly sharp focus during these long months of US-backed Israeli attacks on Gaza. Because the Hamas attacks on October 7th were so horrific and shocking, because the Israeli military response has been so overwhelming and unconscionable and destructive, because we ourselves or our Jewish loved ones have deeply conflicted feelings or strong trauma responses to the protests of Israel's violence, because our Muslim friends locally may ask us to ignore the issue lest it bring more violence their way, because we can see no satisfying solution to these horrors. Many of us throw up our hands and say, it is all too complicated. And Klein has something to say about this too, something so profound and important that I'm going to quote her at length. Because though it may be tempting, Klein writes, Israel-Palestine cannot be written off as a confounding ethnic conflict between a set of intransigent Semitic twins. It began in the lead up to the Inquisition, with the burnings, torture, and then expulsion of Muslims and Jews, continued with the bloody conquest of the Americas and the ransacking of Africa for riches and human fuel to power new colonies, wreaked colonial havoc in Asia, and then returned to Europe for Hitler to distill all the methods forged in these earlier chapters: scientific racism, concentration camps, frontier genocide, into his final solution. But the story didn't end there, Klein continues, because the Allies, who finally saw fit to stop Hitler, decided they did not want to open their borders to his surviving victims, and instead offloaded their Jewish problem, along with their collective shame and guilt about the Holocaust, onto the Arab world and said, you take it. Engaging with the form of Zionism that created the State of Israel in 1948, she continues, means accepting that a people, just like a person, can be victim and victimizer at the same time. That they can be both traumatized and traumatizer. The story we are trapped in is not about a people or two people or twins. It's a story about a logic, the logic that has been ravaging our world for so very long. End quote. And this is a story about a logic of domination and white supremacy. It is a logic that implicates us all in this world on fire. And we did not create this logic. And we did not steal these lands we live on from indigenous people. And we did not enslave others. And many of us were not alive during World War II, when US anti-Semitism helped create the State of Israel. And yet the logic lives on, powerful. What I choose to do impacts you, and what I choose to do impacts the earth itself. And when I really think about how overwhelming the harm of climate change is, I know I should choose to never fly again. I should join the EJC in putting all hands on deck to stop the expansion of private jet use, stop everything that we can stop, because the world is on fire. And when I really think about the unspeakable atrocities my tax dollars are funding in Gaza, I know I should have said yes when a colleague invited me to Washington, D.C. to take direct action in support of Palestinian people at an upcoming date. I should drop everything, because what is more important than the lives of so many children? And also, there are children dying, starving all over the world all the time. And also, I cannot, by avoiding my 4 flights I plan to take this summer, stop climate change. My one mask at the grocery store will not stop this ongoing pandemic we mostly ignore. Despite not knowing what to do, despite having no solution to this tension, I find myself drawn to community organizing, to coming together with others, to try and shift the logic of destruction, to try to shift the web of interdependence toward life and away from death. And I find meaning in the connections themselves, these double-edged swords. Even as my tax dollars fund the deportation machine, it is also true that from a few connections and some goodwill and one organizer inside the Suffolk County Jail, we have grown a network that connects people all over the world. And each month I am on a Zoom call with local migrants and also with 4 men who call in from the African countries to which they were deported, continuing to organize against the surveillance of immigrants here in the US from Liberia and Senegal. We are all so connected. These connections are not silver linings and nothing balances out. It's just that here we are, in this web of connection. Our interdependence is a fact. And we have choices, too many choices and no perfect choices. We can choose to avoid, to ignore. We can choose to fall into despair. We can choose to focus on our own wellness and our own family and our own community to the exclusion of others. Or we can choose to lean into the mess of it all. Lean into the awareness of how we all impact each other. Lean into responsibility for one another. Lean into the power of our connectedness. Lean in knowing we cannot save the world. Lean in knowing we are causing harm we do not wish to be causing. Lean in because the alternatives will leave us spiritually destroyed. Lean in because it is all we have. Lean in because if we do it together, who knows what new connections we will discover? Who knows what new logics we can create for this world on fire? I invite you to rise in body or in spirit and join in our closing hymn, This Is My Song. It is. Let us find the meaningful connections, the connections that bring us joy amidst all the harm and all the violence, amidst all the destruction and chaos, remembering that all life is sacred. Our lives are sacred, and there is beauty in the way we are all connected.